Yeah, so usually I have a lot of bragging rights when it comes to 4 Olympia titles, but I think we have a larger accolade person in the house here with 4 World's Strongest Man, Brian Shaw, in the house.
I'm glad to be here, man. This is exciting.
The first ever guest.
Yeah, and I don't know that you would put World's Strongest Man titles above Olympia titles. I feel like
it's larger.
I don't know about that worldwide. Maybe.
I mean, dude, it's you got. I mean, you've been publicized a lot more on national television. I mean, the World's Strongest Man is, it's one of those things I watched since a kid. I mean, I knew World's Strongest Man before I knew bodybuilding, and
did you really? Is that true?
Think, I talk about this all the time, and we discuss this. Is listen, I know like Bill Kazmaier was like someone that I looked at. But I feel you kind of revolutionized World's Strongest Man. I want to talk about that, of course, because I think it's really, really exploded. I mean, I remember sitting at the Arnold Classic, and my first Arnold Classic, Mark Henry won the first Hummer alongside with
2002.
Me. Yeah, 2002.
Yeah,
and I sitting backstage and seeing these guys come out and like being towering over us, and I was 273 at that show.
Yeah.
And then Mark Henry got up there, and he was a beast, right?
I'll tell you what, he crushed that contest. It was fun for me to watch, and I
were you there then, or
2002? No, I was still in college.
Yeah, you weren't even probably following it then, right?
Yeah, well, a little bit. Like, to be fair, at that point, I had followed World's Strongest Man as a kid. Of course, watching it on TV and all that. But like at that point, it was you in the magazines, and like more bodybuilding, if you will, was more prominent because you'd go in the store and of course all the magazines are there, and it's something where I think any younger guy is going to the gym, and at that point you're seeing the magazines because you didn't have social media, you didn't have any of that, so it's like, I'm going to pick up this magazine and look at it, and I would say like you guys looked larger than life. I mean, like, look at the covers behind you, and it's just, it's surreal, right? Because it's like I've been a fan of both my whole life. Like growing up, I was a fan of strength, I was a fan of training, I was a fan of size, like all of it. Like I've just kind of that world. I was always fascinated by that world, and I feel like there's so much that's similar in a lot of ways and different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot.
Yeah, we're always talking about. I always tell you you're like Jay, and I tell Jay you're like Brian, because you guys are very similar with your approach. Like, I've seen you, like Jay hasn't, competed in many years, but I've been to your gym and I've seen how you train, and I see the regimen, and that's how he was. But then outside of that, on the business side, I see how you take time with fans. I see how he does this. You guys operate, pretty much the same, but you guys had no idea you guys were that similar. But I see it because I do stuff with both of you guys around the world.
See, but in some ways, I agree with you 100%. But I got to learn from Jay in that area because, and we can get into this a little bit more, like,
dude,
the early days.
That fucking floors me a little bit, man.
What's that?
That you actually follow my stuff, and I know there's a story behind this, but we're gonna get to that. But it's like, yeah, I sit here, and when we talked about having you on today, and it was the opportunity, you're coming to Vegas, and I said, man, all the questions I want to ask him, and it's still kind of surreal to me that someone of your caliber now that's had such a amazing career and still continuing, right? Where I'm stepped away now, that something that I did elevated what you did, or you learned something. So to me, it's still
big
it's
time,
crazy.
man. I was watching the DVDs, and you're sitting here eating and grinding, and like, it was something that I could appreciate. I could appreciate the small details where some people maybe look at it and don't maybe get that involved in what's actually going on behind the scenes, and the mindset and what's making you tick at that point. And like, that's what was fascinating to me. And I feel like some of those, like the training DVDs you put out were really cool. It's something I could throw in, and it would motivate me in different ways. Not just like, oh, wow, you look great or whatever. It's like, what's the discipline and the grind to make that happen and become a reality? That's what fascinated me. I've always kind of liked that, like, nuts and bolts of what is making this individual go down this path, and when it gets hard, why are you getting up and doing the training and the everything that it takes, the food, the just the, like I said, the nuts and bolts of all of it. It's fascinating to me, you know?
Yeah, that was really unique about like Ronnie Coleman and myself. Like I always tell everyone, like social media people, we have a huge, audience now, and they don't know anything. We have our old school people that realize that there was, an existence in this before social media, but like we showcase those on the magazines and obviously through the DVDs. Like we got into your house and we showed how the eating is. And listen, everything you do is around the food, right? I mean, I know coming here, it's like all about the food. You have to make sure you're eating, and it's like
big time,
even prior to like filming. And that was the unique thing that Ronnie Coleman and myself did that really catapulted us above everyone else, was because we shot DVDs every year, and we would let people drive with us. We would let people sit in our house with us. We would actually cook our meals, and we would sit and eat our meals. And some people might be like, man, how can you sit and watch someone eat like that? But, people would study. People would study how we placed the weights on the weight rack. People would study how we loaded the plates and how loud the click was when they banged together. And that's the smallest things. But, it all goes back to like when I first started, I was a pretty athletic guy. I played football in high school, and I was bigger than most kids. I was only 200 when I graduated, 5'9" from high school. But I was still bigger than the average person. That's really what, gave me more motivation to get in the gym, because people already came to me and said, man, you got the size. And I know with your background, like, I always wondered what the start was for you. Like how big, I know you played college ball, basketball, which it amazed me.
Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, I was always a bigger kid. Always.
Like what like high school, like you graduated at, what do you think?
So in high school, I got up to, I was probably not quite 300 pounds.
Wow.
Like, but this was before I started training or really got into it at all. So it was not, I mean, I was still athletic because I always did sports and all that, but it was like, okay, at that point, it was kind of like setting a goal of going to college, and I really wanted to get a scholarship and all that. So I knew that I had to get in the weight room and train. And then that's what clicked for me, was I could walk in there and train and get results, and then come back and do it again and get more results. And so it was like an immediate addiction to, I want to work harder because it's making me feel better and I'm seeing what's happening, but also it's going to open the door for me to go play in college, which ultimately it did. But I was always just kind of really dedicated as a kid to different things. I would do things that nowadays kids would probably not understand, So in my high school, was a smaller school, and one of the things that I did was the freshman basketball team practiced before school. So you had to go in at like 5 in the morning or 5:30, whatever. And my uncle actually coached that team. But as a 7th grader, I asked to manage the team. But I would get up at 5 in the morning and go in, and basketball's happening typically middle of winter, so it's dark, it's cold, it's whatever. But as a 7th grader, I would do that. So I'd essentially go practice with the 9th graders, shower, go to school, and then I would go practice with my team after school at that point. But I would do things like that because I was just very driven and wanted to get better and wanted to practice and all of that. But I was definitely a bigger kid, and then I got into training, and then I kind of transformed myself at that point, and then I started running faster and jumping higher and kind of opened that door for me to go play in college. But, it just was, natural gift of size, I guess.
When you were in high school, were you like heavily recruited to go play? Do you have a bunch of offers?
So I because I was at kind of a smaller school.
Where was this, by the way?
Colorado.
Okay.
So I grew up in Fort Lupton was the name of the town. So it was a smaller town, but we weren't one of the bigger schools in the state. And so I think a lot of colleges look at like your competition and who you're playing against. And if you're not at one of the big powerhouse schools, you don't play against one of the bigger, the competition you go into. I feel like I was I was not bad, so I got recruited by a few schools, smaller schools, whatever. And so I ended up, because I wanted to go play at a bigger school, I decided to go JUCO out of high school so that I could play against that bigger competition and hopefully open the door to play at a bigger school. But it was, I definitely got recruited, but I wouldn't say like it was heavily recruited. It wasn't like I was, touted as, anything special other than like, oh, he has a potential to maybe go play in college. It wasn't really anything more than that. So
Where'd you end up playing?
So I played 2 years at a JUCO in Colorado. And at that point, you kind of start to realize the bigger schools, I kind of got to the point where I was getting recruited then out of JUCO to go play for my next 2 years. And I got some Division I like stuff where they were talking to me, interested in me, because I would go play at these bigger camps where, all the top coaches were there, like the big guys were watching. And so you'd go in and play and you had kind of your, sheet of your, kind of accomplishments and this and that. And so they would recruit guys from there. It's kind of like a camp where they're looking at like, guys for the bigger schools too. But I ended up deciding at that point, I was like, okay, look, I can go play D1 because that was my goal. I wanted to do that. And I had,
but did you want to go to the NBA? Or did you have thoughts of?
I definitely did.
Like, I mean, you're getting up at 5 a.m.
Yes.
And you're doing like before school, like that's crazy. Like, that's dedication. So obviously you had a goal of like, I want to take this.
I definitely did. I definitely did. And I think through college, some things started to change. It's kind of hard to explain, but I then said, all right, look, I've got this opportunity. I'm going to go play. And I decided to go to a school in South Dakota is where I ultimately went. And one of the reasons was it was only like a 5 to 6 hour drive for my parents to come. And they were like heavily involved in coming to watch. And I was like, I could go and, I had different recruiting offers to go like to the East Coast, some places. And Alaska was like, they host the Great Alaskan Shoot, I think that they call it. But like you would get to play against Duke and, some of those bigger schools. But I was like, if I go to Alaska, my parents are never going to watch me play other than when I get to play on TV, So I was like, that's not great. So it was kind of one of these things where I was like, all right, I can go to this smaller school and play a lot more and be like one of the main guys that's playing all the time. Or you could go to a big program and maybe be fighting for some playing time and whatever. And at that point I had got more into training and I kind of the direction of my life was going more towards strength because ultimately I wanted to be a strength coach. That's really where I wanted to go. So I was like, okay, this school had a really good program that I liked the professors and whatever. So I was like, okay, everything's just kind of leading down this path. So I decided to go there. And, when I got done playing, I had some offers to try out to like go play overseas and that type of thing. But it just wasn't really my love for the game of basketball had kind of changed. And there's no other way to really say that.
We all go through that.
Yeah. It just kind of changed a little bit. And I was like, I am wanting to work harder, but I would go in the off season, I would go in the gym and put on, whatever, 15, 20 pounds. And then the season would come and I'd be like, man, I just worked so hard to get all this on. And now the coach would get pissed because I would come back and I'd be 20 pounds overweight for what he wanted me to be, but I was still in a position where I'd have to go through the season and I would end up losing weight. And it really pissed me off, to be fair, because I was like, all right, I want to be stronger. I'm really addicted to the training. So I started to love lifting weights more than playing basketball, like as I got done, at least toward the end of my college career. So, and that kind of, it just kind of naturally opened up the direction that I wanted to go with things.
Did you start competing in strongman right out of college then?
No, I didn't. So I started just training to get stronger because I loved it. So I went down the path of, and this will kind of lead to how I met Jay for the first time, but I went down the path of like, okay, I got to open these doors to be in the strength and conditioning world because that's a competitive field because there's only so many schools and only so many positions. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go do my internship and whatever. It was at the Colorado Athletic Club. And that was kind of like, all right, it's a cool opportunity downtown. I get to learn some stuff in the training world at least. And then hopefully I'll be able to open the door to go into strength and conditioning, which ultimately I was able to do that. But at the Colorado Athletic Club is where I met Jay for the first time.
I know you've told me the story.
Yeah.
I've never heard it.
So, listen, I know in athletics they teach you more about strength than repetitions, and I always,
Yep.
I always fought with people about because listen, you can build a lot of size with 1, 2, 3 reps, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ideally, as a bodybuilder, we're 8 to 12 repetitions, and it's just more like faster rep speed. Like, and we take less rest time. It's 45 to 60 seconds between each set, where sometimes when you're trying to power train, it's a lot different. So. That's always the transition. So it seems like, from the get-go, you were taught this is for strength, right? So explosive, and that's kind of what led you into more like your kind of training, right?
I was learning. I was constantly learning. So,
but did you watch our stuff? Did
Yes.
you watch bodybuilding stuff and say, did you notice the difference on like, wow, that guy does 12 reps or?
I mean, of course, you naturally get introduced to it, and because I was following you and these guys that were, and you were doing the more reps, I kind of naturally started doing that too, and of course you had kind of the, whatever it was, power cleans or more explosive type training that were related to the game of basketball. I always liked doing the reps because I wanted to get bigger. So it's like, okay, I'm going to do more hypertrophy work because I like being bigger, right? It's maybe not going to necessarily help me directly with basketball, but I was still doing the squatting and power cleans and stuff like that was hopefully going to help me be more athletic. But my accessory work, I would do more reps. But I started, I think, over time to notice more of a difference. But even now, I like to throw in more volume with my accessory work. So like, I may not be doing deadlift for the higher reps unless I have to train for that. I do more lower reps and then do the accessory
You have
work.
so many unorthodox exercises that you do, and I want to get into that because when he went up and watched you train and he told me like, you should see this is the makeshift things. And, and obviously you have changing events all the time that we'll talk about, but so we met.
So you walked in, right? And the girl at the front desk charged you to go in, right? And I saw you walk in and I went to her and I was like, do you realize who that is? Right? And she's like, no. And I was like, I was so floored that more people there didn't know who you were.
I must have been in town for guest posing or something.
Something. So you walked, so that would have been 2004, probably 2004. Because
I already won some Arnold's and I had won the Olympias. Yeah.
So you're like
pretty established.
Yeah. Like I was like, oh, wow, this is cool, man. So you're walking in and I'm just like, I went in and basically I got mad at her for charging you to walk in. I was not pleased. And granted, I'm like the lower guy on the totem pole here, but I was like, you realize what you've done. Like, and so I went over and I apologized to you. So I was like,
nice,
hey, yeah, you were really nice. You were riding a bike. And I remember I was looking at your arms and your bicep was like ridiculous. And I was just like, wow, this is great. But I got to go say sorry because like I feel like it was such an insult like at that point that you got charged at the front door. And so I was just like, I walked over and I'm sure I didn't say much, but I was like, hey, Jay, she didn't realize who you were. Like, I'm really sorry about that. And you're like, oh, it's fine. Like, you're real calm and whatever. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It was good, man.
It's $10 probably,
Yeah, I'm sure down there it was probably 15 or 20, but it was just one of those things where it was a cool kind of surreal moment because I had, of course, been following all your stuff. And so you walk in and I was, whatever, of course, watching you train and like trying to follow your every move, I'm sure, whatever. But you were super, super nice to me and I was a nobody then, so it's kind of like one of those things. And then that's just kind of like what Matt brought up there, just kind of like carried on where I'm saying that I learned stuff from you because we would go then once I started getting into, some of the contests and going to different places, we would be in a different airport, like in Iceland or somewhere. And you'd walk over and you'd say, hey man, how's it going? Whatever. And I'm like, that's Jay Cutler. And he's coming over and saying that to me. Like you didn't have to do that, like you definitely didn't have to do that. So I had a sense of just like, wow, right? Like, it's like, this dude is like accomplished. He could easily say, don't talk to me or leave me alone or whatever. And just different experiences like that with you. And I've had other ones too, But I told myself at that point, it's like, all right, if I ever get to be somebody that people want to say hi to or whatever, I'm going to make the time of day for any person.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter who they are or what they're about or whatever. Like if you're willing to stop and say hi, then I'm going to give you.
It's important for people at your guys' level to do that because, and we talked about this on a podcast in the past. When someone comes up to you, you have no idea what's going on in their life.
Totally.
You don't know if they drove. You know how many times we've gone places, or even times I've been with you, and someone's like, "I drove 15 hours to be here." Like you don't know what that person did, and all they want is that tiny little moment,
Sure,
that they can cherish. And if you're an asshole to them, they will hate you for the rest of your life. And they don't know what you went on. So you guys have both always, hey man, no matter how bad your day is, no matter how tired you are, like when you did the last World's Strongest Man, you stood there for 7 or 8 hours and saw every single person. And every one of those people left there and went, dude, Brian Shaw's my hero.
Yeah. But it's that, like you said, it's that brief. The way I look at it, and I'm sure Jay's the same, but it's like you only get that brief moment with each person, and then they're going to remember that interaction forever. So it doesn't matter if you're having a bad day or you're tired or you're hungry or thirsty, whatever. It's like you just get that moment, and like you said, you realize like, hey, this person has dedicated time out of their life and their day and whatever to come say hi, and it's you don't know how you've maybe affected them or helped them or whatever, and it's a lot of positivity that you get to spread with people, which is, I mean, how cool is that? It's like, just through what I've got to do or what Jay's got to do, it's like you get to affect people you don't even realize.
Yeah.
Like quite literally don't even realize.
And when I go to appearances with either one of you, I usually stand towards the front and I help get people through the line, and I hear stories from everybody. And the stories I've heard over the last decade, just endless stories. Or, hey man, I almost killed myself or something, and I watched their stuff and they motivated me. Or I was 400 pounds and now I'm 200 pounds because of this guy or Jay or because of you. And so I hear all these stories, and it's like, this is real. This is real life. And a lot of people in that position don't realize that you are a role model to people, and you do affect people. You may not know, you may not hear it every day, but there's people that watch you, that lean on you to get through life.
Sure.
You don't ask for it, but it just comes with the territory.
Yeah, it kind of floored me because he told me, last World's Strongest Man was in California. They had the restrictions and whatever.
Yep.
And you were disappointed because you're like, I can't meet anybody. I need to set this up.
100%.
That is crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I remember him messaging me and he was like, look, there's not going to be fans. I want to be able to see fans. So what can we do?
Yeah.
Obviously all of us are with Trifecta.
And how long did you do the meet and greet for that last time?
We got there at like 4:00, and I think we left at 11:30, almost midnight.
Yeah.
And you stood there the whole time?
The whole time.
Yep.
The whole time.
Yeah. And I told people before, and they ended
And
up.
you competed now for 4 days or whatever prior, right?
I was shot. Yeah. Yeah, I was shot, man.
He put it out there. He said, hey, I'm going to come here. I'm going to see every last fan. And I got there a little bit before.
Yep.
And I remembered pulling up, and I'm like, holy shit, the line's like a quarter mile long. I'm not exaggerating. It was long.
Yeah.
Did you ever look and say, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to get through this?
I think at the beginning when we walked out, I was like, wow, this is a turnout, man. Like this is
But you
is cool.
expected it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
But the cool part about it was on a random Monday night. So it wasn't like it was Saturday. It
That's
could have
right,
been.
because we finished on a Sunday.
Yeah, it could
so
have
it was
been
the next day.
If that was Saturday, it would have been 10 times that.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't have got.
so there are kids and
Oh
parents.
my God,
and-
it was
people from everywhere.
I mean, it's kind of overwhelming to be
it is.
fair.
I know. I've been through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. Like Matt said, I mean, there was people there. What they said, they had driven 8-9 hours just to come for that, because I'd put it out before, and then thankfully they let some people in to watch this year, which was great. But we put that out before, because I was like, look, if you can't come, I want you to have an opportunity to come meet me and say hi. So we'll set it up.
When Brian reached out and he said, I really want to do this. Fortunately for us, Trifecta, that's their backyard.
Yeah.
So I reached out to the
Found a
team there,
gym,
and they said, we got plenty of gyms, and they sorted whatever gym made the most sense for that many people, and they helped set it up for us. And Brian promoted it, we promoted it, and
it was cool.
it was just a cool experience because all these people didn't get to see him, and they wanted to. And they announced that there weren't people bought tickets, or they had tickets for way in advance, so people are coming anyways, and they weren't going to be able to see you, but now they were.
Yep.
So it
worked out. It worked out really good, man. But that's like if you think because I know, and it's like, it's cool to talk to somebody that is in the same position that knows, because I mean, you've quite literally done that for years and years and years.
Almost
like
20 years,
you're traveling the world, you're doing these events, you're meeting people, and you're having events like that where you walk out of there and it's tough, but it's also like the best feeling in the world, because you walk out and you're like, man, I'm exhausted, but like, how many people just told me a positive story, or like, and you at least for me,
That's
like
motivation,
I walk away, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah. It's like the best feeling in the world to have these people come, and it's such a positive interaction and something positive you walk away with, even though you're exhausted. It's like you come back and it's like, well, I'm going to go work harder now because of all those people.
You know what's crazy though, Brian, is that, I'm removed now 8 years from competition.
Yeah.
My last competition. And you aren't in this position yet, but after you remove yourself and you reflect it takes a few years, and then you understand, like, people still come to you. They still like have their stories and they're still motivated by you. That becomes like your trophies and your everything. Like, you can see all these awards, right?
Yep.
All that means so much more to me now, because I'm not trying to win titles anymore. There's no more trophies to be had. Obviously, I'm getting like Lifetime Achievements Award, like at this Olympia and things, cool things like that. But now, like that, you're listening to people reach goals. And this doesn't mean they're on a World's Strongest Man or anything, even that level. They're just overcoming obstacles in life, right? So that's really gives you a lot of motivation. But, when you sit there for, 7 hours, right? You're going against, like, number one, you're on your feet, you're tired, you're missing meals, right? Because, you're not eating what you normally eat, which I want to get into, because it's just, it's a lot. I'm just, people are going to be blown away by what you eat, and how your diet. I mean, you at one point were 400 and what?
I think the top weight that I was at was like 460, probably around there. Yeah, 450 to 460.
And you're today are about how much?
Probably 415, 420.
Okay, so this is lighter.
Lighter, yeah.
Someone hit me today and said, how big is Brian Shaw? I said, well, he's kind of small right now. I said, he's only 400.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm sorry, because I know that 15 pounds might mean a lot to people. But I said, he's a little smaller right now. He's 400, and the guy's like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. The perspective is very different. It's very different.
I wanted to talk about, just like what Jay was saying, the food aspect, because I remember
I know what you eat because I hear what your orders are from Trifecta, which is
you eat about as much as 3 pro bodybuilders that are 300 pounders.
That's crazy. Yeah.
The orders that you get.
Yeah.
But I just remembered some of our conversations, and I wanted to kind of touch on what you eat, like now when you're in quotes smaller, because I remember at times you're like, hey, I need to eat more white fish and this.
Sure.
Or the times when you needed to get as big as you had to.
Yes, I want to hear the crazy stories.
And I remember you telling me, like, your coach is like, I have to go eat this before bed every night. So kind of touch on the different diets at different times and different sizes.
Like I mean, listen, you're migrating into this, right? You go up and up and up with the food. That's what I did. I mean, I needed more protein, more carbs. I mean, I ate 1,000 carbs a day. People thought I was bananas,
Sure.
because I was 300 pounds, 5'9".
Yeah.
And, now I eat half as much, right? And I still eat a decent amount of food for what I'm doing, but I can't imagine. I got to hear what you eat.
Yeah,
or ate.
I mean, it's a lot. It's a job. Well, just like you, it was a job. Like, quite literally, eating is a job. Like, you're basically married to it in a way. So if you leave the house, you have a cooler, you have your next meal planned, or next meals. And a lot of times, if I go out, I'll pack an extra meal too, just in case I get run long, or like I'm not where I need to be. Especially in contest prep. Now is like coming out here on this trip. It's nice because this is kind of like
downtime.
I'm done for the year, and I get a little bit of relax. Yeah. Which is great. But like when you're leading up, it's like you can't miss, because people don't understand. It's like you can't make it up, right? So like if you go a couple hours and then if you were to miss that meal, it's not like you can just add it to the next one. You can't get it in. So it's like you have to be regimented with the diet. But, you know, it's a lot of meat, I would say.
How many meals a day?
So normally for me is like the top that I've really been up to is about 7, like 6 or 7. But I would say by and large, it's kind of scaled back now for me where I can pretty comfortably get it in 5. But not less than 5. 5 to 6, maybe 6 would be like an extra shake or, you know,
give an
like
example of what like your typical breakfast.
I hate macros, but I want to know like, okay,
Sure.
this is what I eat, like this many ounces or
Sure.
pounds.
So like a breakfast would be like I've been having leading up to this last contest. I was having bison for breakfast. So like that would be like say 8 ounces of bison, and then you would mix that with like between 6 and 8 eggs on top of the bison. And then you would like training days, I would get waffles, which was kind of cool. So I'd have like between 4 and 6 waffles. And then I would also get fruit typically. So that would be one meal. And then
I'm not blown away by that, really.
Not happy? No.
I'm not blown away by that.
Because that's kind of 8 ounces.
And then
6 eggs.
like the other meals, typically I would have. Now, granted, this is a post-cooking weight is the way that we're weighing everything. So post-cooking would be, most of my portions are between like around 14 ounces, 12 to 14 ounces post-cooking. So you'd be, what would that be? Well over a pound of like before cooking. And that's like a normal meal. So then you do that.
Like how many carbs with that?
Carbs would be significant. Carbs are high.
Like rice, potatoes, or
Like how much rice
pasta,
rice would be like 2 cups, and then on top of that we would normally throw sometimes we put in like some spinach, sometimes we put in something like that, and then fruit too. So I'd have more fruit on
I
top
could
of
fuck
that.
with that.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
I think you know what? I eat a lot of food, man. You know, but
See, this
I
is
was
what we're-
pre-cooked weight, so I ate 12 to 16 ounces pre-cooked. So
Okay.
yes, the protein's a little, but I mean, shit.
I remember
Yeah.
you telling me that your coach, when you was trying to get you as big as possible, you had to go eat fast food every night.
Fast food was one of the meals, like during the day.
What was
So
that?
he had a cheat meal.
So cheap, and this was every day. So it was like I would have to go and have, like, if I would go to like a burger place, you'd get like two double burgers, and then fries, and like I'd have like a large Coke or something on top of that.
That's what you eat every day.
This guy shits on you.
So, but that would be like part of the normal day. And there's times where on the diet I've had to have pizza, like a whole pizza every single night to finish the night.
You had 2 pizzas when we were in PA that long ago. You
Yes.
ordered 2.
Yep.
And remember, they never came, didn't they? The guy skipped you.
Didn't come. Yep. That was horrible.
When we were there, we went out to eat, and I remember we ordered. I was like really hungry.
He told me this
so I got like
story.
a 20-something ounce steak, and Brian's like, "I'm gonna get that one too." Oh, then he got potatoes.
What did I was still hungry, so I got another steak.
At the end of all this, he had the salad, he had the appetizers, he had the steak, he had the potatoes, he had all this, and at the very, and then he got cheesecake, and he's like, "I'm still hungry." So he got another
the guy
filet.
came back and he was like, "Can I give you a check?" And I was like, "Actually, we're gonna order another."
He ordered another 8-ounce
true.
steak and another potato.
That was after an appearance, so that was like I didn't get to eat.
but that was
like,
still like almost 30 ounces of meat.
it was a lot. Yeah.
You know
So
what?
the bigger meals, like the thing is, if you were to do one meal, it's not, it's a lot, but people could finish it. It's
But
like,
it's the consistency.
this is the thing. So most people be like, okay, I ate that. Now I'm not going to eat for maybe 5 or 6 hours, and it's like, okay, 2.5 hours later, I got to do that again.
I ate every 2 hours.
Yeah,
That was
And
my
you-
thing.
How many meals were you up
I
to at the biggest?
Anywhere from 6 to 8.
Okay,
I mean, I actually did 10 with shakes included.
wow.
But I had, like I mentioned, I tried to do 12 ounces of meat. I did like 2 cups of rice, 100 grams of carbs every meal. And then around the training, like I would drink sugar and stuff like a carb drink or whatever that would allow me to get more calories around the training. So like my ideal meal after training would be 300 carbs.
Okay,
So I would take it because you can digest carbohydrates a lot easier, right?
Big time.
Than proteins.
Yep.
And I would eat eggs. Like I'd have 2 whole eggs, but I have mostly egg whites. So I was eating 30 egg whites for breakfast a lot of times, and I was cracking those at the time.
Yeah, that's. I
mean, the
good
plate
quantity.
was this,
Yeah.
but it was the hardest thing I did. Like the training was easy for me.
I say
The
the same
food,
thing. Yep.
Because sometimes, like, we sit here and say, yeah, we eat every 2 hours, but we're not necessarily starving every 2 hours.
No.
And sometimes it took me sometimes an hour to eat my food.
Yes.
Like, I would sit at the plate and just eat, let it digest a little bit, eat. Yep. And by the time I washed my dishes and I cooked my meals fresh, I don't know,
Yep.
Obviously you have, your meals pre-cooked or whatever, a lot of them, but I'm sure you're still prepping the
At
other
times,
things around them.
before I worked with Trifecta, I pretty much cooked everything.
So I want to know your trifecta, or like a trifecta order. Is it weekly?
Yeah. He gets like 4 boxes.
Damn, I get one.
One,
bro.
really?
I get one too.
Really?
You get 4 boxes.
Yeah.
Because if I remember, it's like 20-something pounds of bison, like
Yeah.
10 pounds of cod or something.
I probably eat in a month, I would say like 100 pounds of bison.
So when you go out for a breakfast,
Yeah.
if you want to go out for breakfast, Carrie says, hey, let's go eat.
Yeah.
What do you do?
If we were to go to breakfast, I would try to replicate. Now, is it like I get a cheat breakfast?
Whatever.
Well, no, just like if you're like you're trying to stay on schedule.
Yep.
Like number one has bison, right? You can't order bison a lot of places. Maybe in Colorado you found your unique places, but here you are in Vegas. You get up tomorrow morning and you guys we're going to go eat and try to find like, what do you order on a breakfast menu?
See, that's the thing. So if I went to a place, I would probably sub in. I would probably get like steak. Like steak and eggs or whatever.
But you need a 2-pound steak or just a pound, like a.
I would. So I would.
Steak?
Most of the time, I would order at least 2 meals.
Okay.
So I would get like, if I was gonna have steak, I'd probably order that plus another one, maybe plus extra eggs. That's
you could order an 8-ounce steak and then you'd have 6 eggs with it, right?
Totally. Yep. So you can plug it in.
I can't imagine how much some of his bills.
That was one of the things I was going to say. Before you had Trifecta, how much money did you spend per week on average?
See, I would.
I never tracked it, so we make this up. But I spent $100,000 a year on food.
You think
between eating out and cooking and because we eat out, I eat out a lot.
Yes.
It's like I didn't want to
eating. If you eat out, the money goes up like crazy. Because just think like that night when
it was $120-something bucks for just 2 of us.
So if I go out like a normal meal, if I'm getting steak or something, it's even for me myself would be like close to $100.
Yeah.
Just for my,
because you can't just get
and
one
that's
steak,
not
you have
even
to get
going
2.
to like a say nicer place. But if you're going out like that, and then if you're doing that, eating out a lot, God,
if it's you and the wife and the boys, you're $250.
Yeah, easy. So from a if I'm cooking at home, but I would say probably like in a heavier eating time, $3,000 to $4,000 probably. Like, and that would be like, because what I used to do would get I would get like buy like either half of a cow or a whole cow, and I'd get it all. So I'd have it in the freezer. And that was a cheaper way to do it rather than trying to get it all the time. So I'd get like the best beef that I could get or whatever. And then I would have it all. A lot of times I would have them grind it up, like even some of the steaks, because I like to eat ground up meat.
You digest it better.
Yeah. It was just easier to cook and easier to digest. So they would think I was crazy because I was.
So I remember seeing videos a long time ago. You go to Costco and it's like
$600
for
that
a
I
couple
did do
days.
too. Once because they had bison. Once I started wanting to eat bison more. They had the ground bison.
Why do you choose bison?
I like it
the
better.
flavor?
I like it better.
It's healthier.
They say it's leaner. Yeah, they say it's leaner.
It's a little bit leaner, and I just I just started to gravitate toward it.
Yeah.
I liked it better. Not that I don't like steak, beef and or even ground beef. It's not like I dislike that. It's just kind of, and I can.
It's got less cholesterol in it too.
Yeah. Normally with the way Nathan Payton's the guy I work with for my diet, but normally I have a choice, so I can choose bison or I could choose beef or whatever. So I can rotate it up, or if I'm going to have salmon or I'm going to have certain things for certain meals. So it keeps it interesting that way. So I like to get protein not only from just bison, but like in a day we might have 3 or 4 different protein choices or things that I'll do.
So Trifecta saves you a lot of money.
Big time.
Did you hear what he said though? Yeah. He said, I would just buy a cow at a time.
But that's smart. But you probably did the same thing. Your family back home.
Listen, where I grew up, it's funny because, we have these similarities.
Yeah.
People used to think I was nuts. I had a local butcher. I lived in Massachusetts, and, my brother raises beef cattle anyway. But we had a butcher, and I literally would go and he'd have the cow hanging. Yep. And I'd say, this is hamburg, this is steaks. And I would, have it lean down.
That's amazing.
And I would pack it in 1 pound squares.
Yep.
And I would put it in a freezer. I had a freezer in my garage dedicated for the beef.
Yep.
Then I would buy from the guy 140 pounds of chicken at a time.
Okay.
And I would have those in individual, they'd be like shrink wrapped, and I would have that in another freezer. And every day I would take out, 2 beef bricks, and I would take out 2 chicken. It was like 4 pounds of meat a day.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's how I prepped my day. And people
That's
thought I
amazing.
was nuts. I buy 30 dozen eggs at a time from a farm stand. So my whole refrigerator was full. It was a huge case of eggs, and I'd burn through eggs like crazy.
Oh,
Because,
totally.
I would eat sometimes twice, 3 times. I mean, it was the diet I did, mostly eggs, like 5 meals a day. I did 30 egg whites every meal. So, I mean, the food is just astronomical. And
Big time. Well, you worked on a farm growing up?
no, my family had a farm.
Okay.
My brother now migrated. He raises cattle. We have about 60 beef cows now, but we didn't have we had a few animals then. We raised pigs. We had pork or whatever else, and we had big gardens. But my dad later on, when I left and went off and was bodybuilding on the West Coast, that's when he really started getting more animals. But
Okay.
we had horses and we had a couple of cows, but nothing major. Now my brother is a full-fledged farmer. All
Gotcha.
his vehicles are farm vehicles, and he basically hays all year round. So
did you have to do a lot of hay work growing up?
I did a lot of chores. I mean,
that's-
you talked about getting up early, and the work ethic and the dedication. Mine came from my family forcing me to work on the family business, and so I got up before school, after school, school vacations and weekends. I spent chopping wood, haying, doing all these things that made our family money.
Totally. So here's the question. So my uncle had a farm growing up, right? And so I had to go out and I would help him stack hay and do hay.
The bales.
Right? Yeah. So you're doing, I don't remember. And I used to get paid per bale. I would always count it up. And when it was hard, I was like, all right, I'm getting another, quarter for this bale. So we're moving it, right? So we'd hand stack it, and then you'd go and then obviously put it on the truck and then take it back and then make the, the stack back once you got it out of the field. But I hated it, right? Like as I was doing it, because it's so hard. It's so hard and so challenging, especially at a younger age. So I was like 12 years old, and I had to learn how to drive the truck, and it was a big stick shift, so that we could do that. And my brother, I have an older brother that's 2 years older than me, so it would be either he would drive and I would stack, or vice versa, right? But we would go out there and earn money together, and it was like, I'm so thankful for that. Like later on, because of the work ethic, because it was like, and I got later once my brother had graduated. I was in high school, and I would ask my friends to come out there, and the guys I played basketball with, whatever. And I remember there was multiple guys that I would take out there to do it with me, and they would quit halfway through the day. They'd quit, and they'd be like, "I'm done. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to help you finish." And so I'd have to like figure out how to finish it myself or whatever. But it's just a different level of hard work that most people can't cope with.
I hated my family because I'm like, why are all the other kids going to the swimming hole or, going to this party at, 3 PM? I mean, I would work sun up to sundown, so
It's hard work too.
And then we end up having a concrete business. So I had to do that also. And that was like, everyone took their school vacations, April vacation or whatever, Christmas vacation. They would go away with their families and come back tan, whatever, after a week of being away. And I was like slugging forms and doing all the concrete stuff for working on the farm. So it's like, you're right. I had a lot of animosity towards my brothers, and I have 3 older brothers that kind of, raised me pretty much, because we have a 10-year age gap. And I had that animosity, and I was like, man, why do I have to do this? But you're right. It taught me. And that's why I was able to outwork everyone. And I think that's what is a huge driver to our success, because, listen, talent only goes so far.
Yep.
And yes, we're hard-headed a little bit, I'm sure, too, right? I mean, we don't know when to stop, but we always have to outwork everyone. And that's what I consider myself. Listen, I didn't have the best genetics, and someone like you may view it and say, man, you're 4-time Mr. Olympia, but I had to work my fucking ass off to do it, right?
Big time. I'm thankful for that same thing, and I think that you had it a little bit different than me. It was like my my parents would kind of send me out there, whatever. But it was a way that I had to earn money because it was, hey, if you want this pair of shoes or you want something, it's like you're gonna have to work for it.
I had to buy all my own clothes for school and everything.
Yeah, it's like at the time you hate it, and going through it, it's tough, especially at that when you're younger, you don't quite understand it. But I've told my wife, I was like, if we can find, I don't know if my uncle will still be, he's still doing it now, but he's getting older and whatever. But it's kind of like I told my wife for my boys, because we have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. It's like if we can get a place where they could go work like that to teach them, just to have them go out there and experience it, where it's like, hey, you have to put this hard work in and you're getting rewarded for it. But just learning that dedication and quitting is not an option. You get it done, and it doesn't matter how much it sucks in the moment. You have to get it done. And it's kind of like, I'm thankful for that. And then I had like one coach in particular in college that my JUCO was very military minded. So there was different things where we had to go through that was kind of like, hey, we're gonna figure out who's gonna quit and who's gonna do it. So he and we had walk-ons that would come on the team, and he wanted to get them to quit. So we did some of that type of stuff. So it's like this mental preparation in a way, looking back, that I feel like I had to go through that has only helped me. It laid the framework of, well, like you said, it's like I've got these other guys. And I remember when I was younger, and I don't know where this came from, but like playing basketball, I would stay outside and I had like, I'd set a goal for myself. Like I had to make whatever it was, 10 free throws in a row, right? And I'm younger. And it's like I could not leave. I wouldn't go inside and go to bed until I could make 10 in a row. And if I got to 9 and missed, I would go again. But it was like I always felt like there was somebody somewhere that was working harder than me. And if I didn't put that work in, they were going to take the spot that I wanted, like to play in college or whatever, right? It was just kind of, and it's the same thing now. Like as you get into competing now, it's like, God, if I'm not putting this work in,
We talked about it yesterday, the fear of losing.
No, I always say it. I asked him, and I'll ask you the same question. Were you driven more because you wanted to win, or were you driven more because you didn't want to lose?
That's a very good question.
There's a huge difference between wanting to be the best and going, nobody's going to beat me. I'm going to make sure I don't lose.
I was scared, man.
Yeah, I would say on that one, if I had to think about it, the satisfaction of winning is one thing, and mentally going to that spot where you visualize yourself winning and being successful. But going into a contest, getting beat is also like, you don't want that to happen.
No.
That's a very motivating thing as well. Like
especially if you have been beat, you don't want that feeling again.
Yeah. I think maybe it changed, to answer that question, maybe it changed for me a little bit from when I hadn't won to when I did, right? Mm-hmm. So like it's different when
I was going to say, what was that like, that the very first time you went into the World's Strongest Man and you won it?
So for me it was
set the stage for us.
Where was this, by the way? I'm admiring the shirt. Why don't I have a shirt like that?
I don't. You are not given.
I'll get you one, man. I'll get you one.
And you guys, there's so many similarities. You got 4 Mr. Olympias, 4 World's Strongest Mans. How many Arnolds did you win?
Yeah, but he's still
How many
going,
Arnolds did you
bro.
win?
3.
How many Arnolds did you win?
3. Yep.
No way.
That's nuts, man. Yeah.
That's why I told you guys are so similar, and you didn't even realize it.
Yeah. But so 2011 was the first one that I won.
Okay.
For me, 2000,
where was this?
That was Wingate University, North Carolina.
Okay.
They held it in 2011. But for me, 2010 I tied. So it's the only time in history World's Strongest Man ended in a tie ever, right? So it's like one of these things. And in that contest, in the very first event of the contest, we had to do this loading race through water, which was horrible. And we had to carry these sandbags through this water. But like, if you've ever tried to run through water, it's a nightmare. And trying to carry, it was brutal. So just to train for that event, like this is the hard work part of it. Like I found a golf course that I could go to, and they had a pond. And so I would take a loading platform out to their pond, and I would drag the kegs. But it was like probably 200 plus yards to get to the pond from where you had to park. So I had to like drag all this stuff in there every week and then set up this platform. Then I'd run through the water, like carrying the stuff. So I was ready for it. I'll say I was ready for it. And so I went in and like with this race, I got to the third bag and I'm going into the platform and your legs, everything's burning and you're just like, all right, I got to finish. And I got there and because so much water had got in the bag and they filled it with rocks. So it was like a water, water so it didn't just stay in place like a normal sandbag would. So I threw it on the platform and all the water kind of shifted and the bag ended up falling off. Oh. So I had first place locked up. I would have won that event. And I had to pick it up out of the water again and reload it. So I dropped to third place on that event, which cost me 2 points, which would have been my 5th title, had I got it done, whatever. There's a lot of other spots in that contest that I could have earned a point or half a point or whatever. Believe me, I've looked at all of it. But, sure. It's kind of like one of those things where I ended in the tie, ended up losing on a count back, which, is that was in South Africa. It was like a 16-hour plane ride back to Atlanta. And I didn't sleep for a second. And I was just like, that kind of set the stage for me at that moment because there's a lot of guys in history that have come this close to winning World's Strongest Man and they never got it done, right? So I was like, I'm not going to be one of those guys.
Yeah, it's like bodybuilding.
I was going to say, this is like you in 01.
Yeah.
So you were this close.
So that's, it's like I was like, I'm bound and determined to set that. So, and this is where like I say be great a lot. And that's where that moment happened for me on that plane ride. I was like, all right, Brian, what are you trying to do? Like ultimately, what's your goal with this? And, with everything that you put all this hard work in, you came that close, you tied, got second place. Like where is this going for me? So I had that kind of epiphany or whatever. And I was like, I'm trying to be great. I'm trying to be great at strongman. I'm trying to be great at life. I'm trying to be great at all these things. So I went back and I got this piece of wood and I was training in this at that time it was a grocery store. It was like a out of business grocery store that I was training in the storage room of. And I went back and wrote on this piece of wood, be great in all capital letters. And I put it up on the wall. And that's where like my whole thing, now it's kind of morphed into, trying to show other people how they can be great in different things. But that was that moment. So that year, I just went back to work. And so in 2011, then people said at that point I couldn't win the Arnold because I was just athletic and I wasn't strong enough and whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm bound and determined to show you right now what's going to happen. And so I went in and won the Arnold very comfortably in 2011. And then won World's Strongest Man. I won every other contest in that year. Like it was just like
what was your age then?
So I would have been in 2011. I guess it would have been about like 28, 29, 30. Like I don't think I was 30. I was maybe 28, 29. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Very similar to
similar.
Yeah.
So it just kind of set the stage, but it's like looking back.
So when you went into that World's Strongest Man on day one, were you like, I'm winning this? Mm-hmm. There's nobody's going to beat me.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is I got to a moment with that contest where I was in a good lead, and then I came out. We did a log press for reps, and it was me versus Drunas Zavickas, he was kind of my arch nemesis, just like Ronnie with Jay, right? You're like, it's just like you have this guy.
It's funny. Ronnie has 8 Olympias. How many Arnolds does Judas have?
God, I think he has 8.
I think he has 8.
Yeah. So anyway, it was this log press for reps, and I had been training it really hard, and all the training that I had done went out the window, and I really messed up badly. I didn't breathe enough, and I went out of the gate too quick, and I had planned my rep pattern, and I just got too excited, and I was still, learning these bigger moments in these competitions where it's like, all right, I have to stake to my plan no matter what happens.
At that moment, he was a seasoned pro then.
Big time, okay. Yeah. So he came out of the gate, and it was his best event. So I was like, I was head to head with him, and he kind of, maybe that threw me off too, but I came out and I just didn't breathe, and I got dizzy, and I was like, oh man, this is not good. And so I had to gut out, and I ended up giving up my lead at that point in 2011, and we were tied. So we were tied going into the Stones, which is the last event. So it was like, all right, this is the moment, right? Like I've trained all this time. So then I just like destroyed the Stones, that was how I won my first title. But it was it's interesting when you look back the path of different things, and like we're going, whether it's childhood or different moments in the sport competing, you learn from and you take back, and it motivates you in different ways to kind of say like, all right, this happened, I'm going to fix that. Or you go back and analyze a performance or analyze a prep or analyze whatever you could have done better, changed, done differently. And I'm sure it's the same thing for you. I mean, it's like you can probably look back in your career and say at certain moments, this is a contest I think I should have won.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was, and I was way more confident at certain ones, but some just clicked, bro. And it was just, I knew this was my time. But you know what? I started the show and I said, your titles are bigger. And I meant, because you had to overcome, like we talk about training and, we talked about mindset, but it seems like they change the events constantly. So you have to adapt. You're in a golf course pond, then you're in an old grocery store. Like
for training.
Like, dude, I had to go to a gym.
Yeah.
And I had to go, I was in my element. Like it was from day one, I picked up weights. I trained at Gold's Gym, and then I migrated to Gold's Gym in Vegas. Like it was the same routine to get to the same goal.
Sure.
Where you constantly had to adapt because they just had to make the shit harder for you.
Yeah.
And you talk about being an athlete and being strong at the same time, but you also, it's technique. So you have to practice over and over and over.
I mean, there is a lot of practice, and kind of at the time I got into strongman, there was nowhere for me to train. Like in Colorado.
That was something I was going to touch on. He can't just go train at LA Fitness.
So, okay, so you got into strongman. Like, what way did you start?
So
like what gym?
Basically, I had kind of went down the path of trying to get into being a strength coach. And I kind of decided it wasn't time for me to be a coach yet. I wanted to still be an athlete and still pursue some things, for me, basically. So I had moved to Arizona, and I got to study under Joe Ken, was the head strength coach there at the time. Really smart guy. And I've kind of maintained our relationship like over the years. And I learned a lot. Very thankful for him because he kind of set the stage for me with training. And I learned some hard lessons under him about form and technique and like when not to push and when to pull back and all that. But so I had got back to Colorado, and I was like, God, I need something to be competitive in. I need a competitive outlet. I have to, because I'm just too competitive. So it's like, I'm loving this training for getting stronger and all that. But that's when it just kind of was like, hey, I've watched strongman. I'm big. And then I started comparing my size to the guys that were competing. So I was like, well, I'm about that size. Maybe he's a little bit heavier, a little this or that. But I feel like I was like, all right, this seems fun for me. So I'm just going to go do it. So I entered a contest. I had only trained in a normal gym. I was training at a world gym at that point. And I was like, hey, let's just go. Let's just go, right? Like, I don't have the equipment. I don't have anything. I'll just sign up and go because it looks fun. And so I went to this contest and ended up winning, which was awesome, like without, prepping for the events, but it just wasn't accessible, So I basically had to find a way to get the equipment. And at that point, I didn't have enough money to be like, oh, I'm going to go buy it. So I was lucky enough to find this guy that out of some scrap metal, he welded in his garage for me. So I was able to like just get my first kind of primitive equipment that was not
You remember
nice.
the first piece you got?
So first piece, he welded me a yoke and then like a set of farmers, and we filled them with dirt to make them heavier to start with, and then they were loadable too. But he welded those up, and then and like a frame carry, and then I had to order a log. I saved up money to order like a metal log.
How much was that?
Probably, I don't know, $300 maybe, something like that. But I just had to save, and so then I just started doing that. So I saved, and then I would invest and save and invest. And, at that point it was a grind because I'm working full time, as well. And I'd got into like some commercial HVAC stuff after being a strength coach where my brother was working in that. And I was like, all right. But again, you're up at 5, start work at 7, work all day, climbing a ladder, whatever, get done with that. And then I would get back, I would eat, and then I'd go to the gym and train. Basically close the gym down, go back to sleep, try to prep my food. So I would go to work with a cooler every day, and I had to eat the contents of that cooler I had to. And at that point I couldn't afford the nice, like, the bison and all that. So I was eating a lot of tuna. If I could afford it, like maybe some chicken, different like concoctions that I would build.
You can always find a way.
Yeah.
You always can. It might not be the best way, but you can find a way.
That's a good point. And that's the thing is, like, a lot of people, and I'll talk to people too that are coming up, because they might look at where I'm at now and it's like, okay, we talk about all this bison, or like you have the money that you can spend. Well, hey, that didn't start like that. No. Like you got to figure out your path, and it wasn't
your way to that.
It wasn't handed, right? Like, it wasn't like I had an unlimited amount of money. Earn not given, which is very fitting. But it's true. It's like I didn't have the equipment, I didn't have the resources, whatever. But I was like, all right. And then once I started getting a little more set up, I took over my parents' garage, and like quite literally broke their garage floor, like crushed it, but lifting stones and stuff in there. But it was like, that's where I trained. It was not insulated. It was not heated. So I would go out, and I remember I'd have to scoop the driveway and throw down some salt and whatever so that I could do my carries outside in the middle of winter. It's very primitive, but it was like I was training by myself. But because it was in my head what I wanted to go and do, I could visualize it. And I was like, you know what? Like, in between sets, I had a little space heater, I remember, because the dumbbells or the bars would get so cold in the winter. I'd have to go over and warm my hands up, and then I'd go do another set, But it's like, some people would think that's nuts. Like, what are you doing? And why would you go out there and do that? But I had a vision and a goal and where I wanted to go, right? And it was just like, I'm going to make this happen. And some people thought I was crazy. And I had a lot of people tell me, I told them, look, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this strongman thing. And I had, a lot of people say, hey, Brian, those guys are way bigger, way stronger. Like, you're not going to be able to compete with them. You're not going to be able to do it, But it's kind of like, if I would have listened to those people then, where would I have gotten versus, creating your path. And it's, as much as you're saying, okay, I got to go to a gym and I got to like just lift weights and I didn't have to make this crazy equipment or do whatever, that in no way, shape, or form means that that's easy.
No, I was broke. Broke, and I scrapped what I could.
Well, didn't you tell a story about like you had so much gas?
Dude, I would run out of gas all the time. And
isn't that crazy?
He still does.
We had no cell phones. I had to run to the payphone and call my friends for gas, and gas was 99 cents a gallon then. So, you could scrounge up $2 and change. And I said, fuck it, I just need to get to the gym.
Yes.
But I was cleaning equipment at the gym for the membership because I couldn't afford it. I was working security at, a place. I was making $5 an hour. My paychecks were $150 a week, and I was working 40 hours. It was crazy, like after taxes and everything. And it was like, but you didn't care because you were going to the gym, and it's just like I said, you had a makeshift, and obviously it's still changing. What events you did this year might be different next year.
Totally.
Right?
Yep. And then you got to figure out a way. So I might have to go build something different or figure out a different way to train.
And this one, they keep going up in the weight. What's this? What's
like a circus dumbbell?
Yeah, it just gets heavier and heavier, bro. How much is it now?
The biggest one that they did a 300 at the Arnold, which that was back in 2016. I think 2016 I did that 300, and then they've actually gone up and done a 320 now, which is, it's insane, like just crazy.
Just think about even at your peak. Even when you're doing shoulder presses.
No, I shoulder
300 with both.
I did harder stuff than most of the bodybuilders, so I would stand and do front presses standing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sure you've. Mm-hmm. And I did up to 315 for reps,
which is awesome.
But that, dude, one hand.
Yeah. Well, it's a different.
I know it's a technique. Yes.
Yeah. It's a different technique. Yes. So it's not like you're strict pressing.
Yeah, but you're kind of
momentum. It's a lot more of a total body.
Yes.
Getting the momentum going and it being explosive and
you
thrown up.
You still have to hold that weight over your head.
Yeah. It's heavy. And that scaled a lot. It scaled a lot even in the sport of strongman. God, 10 years ago. That was not.
But you know what? You still have to go like this.
Sure.
And you have to put it on your shoulder.
Get it
it's
up.
A lot.
Sure.
You got to be strong as hell to do
And I watch you do it like it weighs 50 pounds.
You want to make it look like it weighs 50 pounds.
I remember the first time I saw him doing it, I think it was at the Arnold, and he did it with the right hand, and then he did it with the left hand, and
Yeah.
nobody else.
I was
did that.
one of the only when it was 274. They brought that out, and you would still think I was the only guy that could do it with my right and my left.
Yeah.
But it was just and that probably came from basketball too, because you have to I had to work really hard being right-handed. I had to work really hard to be good with my left hand.
Want to be balanced.
Yeah. So I remember, just like a left-handed layup when I was first trying to do that. I had to do that again and again and again. And so, naturally coming to strongman, it's like, well, how does it make sense to only be able to do it with my right hand? I've got another arm, right? Like I can train harder to get good at it with my left, but a lot of guys don't think that way.
I suck with my left arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suck. I just couldn't really. Didn't have the coordination in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm right-handed, so
yeah, and it's come so natural, and so things like that. But I think it's going back to like you make your path, and I think that's a lot of like the position that you're in. Like to me, when I was getting in, it was like Jay Cutler was here, right? Like it was just, but at that point, that's why I think I found it so fascinating, like your path and your journey and all that. It's like, hey, if I want to get on that level or I want to try to approach that level, I have to make it. I got to find a way.
Have yours, yeah.
And it's not going to be handed to me. It's not going to be given to me. It's like I wasn't coming from that. And I think now, being in it for so many years, I think a lot of people out there are just like, well, okay, Brian Shaw he's just been there. Like they don't go back to that starting point and say like, where did it all start and how did you have to grind to actually make this happen? And now for strongman, it's grown a lot. There are gyms that you can go to that have the equipment, and a lot of gyms now, whether it's more of a functional training place or whatever, they'll at least have a log or maybe a tire to flip or something that you could work with. Whereas I really didn't have access to any of that when I started. It was just like, hey, this is kind of a new thing. There aren't implements that I can go play with or train with or whatever. And then two, I didn't have anybody to necessarily learn from either, right? So I would research guys, I would study video if I could find it, like, whatever it was, to go back and kind of do like a trial and error thing. And then I found out what would work for me, and then I would do it again and again and again. And then eventually I would get better, but it was, I think a lot of people out there, it's important to learn, like for me or for you, it's like you go through tough moments and tough times when you're chasing a dream, right? And now it's great to be sitting here and talking about it and like how accomplished you are and how much you've done in your life and how many different people pay attention to what you do. But that if you wouldn't have gone through those hard moments at the beginning, it would have never got to this point. And I think that's important for a lot of people out there that have a goal or a dream or something they are trying to be great at. It's not going to just be handed to you. You're going to have to go out and work, and at times it's going to suck. Because, I remember the choices I had to make, and I'm sure you had to make the same ones. It's like I didn't have a personal life. My buddies would all be like, hey, we're going to go out or we're going to do this or that. Nope, I can't. I got to stay in and eat. I got to sleep because I got to get up and train, right? But at that moment, in my mind, it was so clear because I was willing to make that sacrifice to get where I wanted to go. And I would go back and do the same thing again.
No days off.
No. Yeah,
We were actually, when we were starting our podcast,
We were going to call it no days
call
off.
it that.
Because there's no, there's no, obviously I'm not an athlete like you guys, but I don't ever take a day off.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's something that you have to do every day for work, no matter what. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when I'll hit people up and like, oh, I'm doing this. I'll do it 3 or 4 days from now. And it's like, dude, no, there's no days off.
Yep.
Like you work. Like you got to work.
Well, that's the thing now. And it's like, it's fun being out here with Jay because I feel like I'm going to learn a lot just being here. And actually, I had a talk with you at Body Power in, I want to say around 2012, because I had gone and done like some of my shirts, and I saved up money to print like my first shirts. I think they maybe print 20,
story
like 24 of them, and it was a lot of money. And it was like after I turned pro, I just had this vision. I was like, hey, I want to try to do some shirts. Like I feel like, and I was like, at this time, I don't know who's going to want them or who's going to want to wear them or whatever. Maybe I can give them to a few people, but I was like, I'm going to have a guy create this logo for me. And now it's been 15 years. So that was 2006 I first did it. But I was like, you were doing all of your stuff. And I remember it was honestly probably a 20-minute conversation or more. And you stood there, we had just eaten food. And I asked you, because I was trying to learn, like, about how can I get stuff out there? Like, and you kind of sat and explained about how you were doing all your merchandise and this and that. And like, but you were always so helpful with me. And I was like, you guys are doing it. And I always thought, well, you guys are putting out the DVDs. You're putting out way more content than Strongman is. Like, nobody's doing that in Strongman. And I think that there's an open door to do some of this stuff.
You found that outlet, man.
Yeah.
Now and now crushing it.
But nobody was doing it. So I was trying to do YouTube stuff like way back, like 2008, around there. I was like filming a little video or whatever and trying to put it out. And some of that stuff, you know, it just, I kind of saw the vision. And then, you know, we've been able to escalate things a lot with that recently. But it was like I started trying way before anybody was really trying to do it for real, you know. But I learned a lot about that, and now, you know, it's so cool to see where things have kind of evolved from, because it was like just this little, you know, kind of corner bedroom, whatever, that I had in an apartment, you know, or even actually took over kind of like the living room area, you know, and I started sewing like some of my own stuff, and I would modify my training gear. Because
that
I
was
like,
something
hey,
I wanted to get in that with you. So Brian, you have all the accolades and you have all the title, every title that's possible, you have it, but you've transitioned into a business guy. You own a lot of stuff. You're one of the few, kind of like Jay, where pretty much everything you have your hands on is yours.
Yeah.
You don't have anyone to answer to. So I know one of the products you have is your Evolution.
Yeah.
And I never knew the whole history of that. And it's really fascinating. And, you know, talk about how that started and why you made your own and the whole process of the sewing.
Hold on a second. You sew?
So I yes, yeah. I know.
He told me this. I was like, what the
Fuck, I don't sew, man.
I brought that up, and both of you guys like, oh, I didn't get a comment. I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Yeah. So me at a sewing machine, I wanted to make protection for lifting the stones. So I wanted to make like a leather that I could put on my arms to protect me, because for whatever reason, my skin gets really irritated with concrete. It's something in it that I'm maybe a little bit allergic to.
Oh, you'd
or
hate
something.
doing concrete on my family business.
Oh, yeah. I would have been covered in. I would have done
hives or some shit, or
it was, and I don't know. It only happened a few times. It could have just been like an irritation, but I was like, you know what? The main reason, to be fair, was that part of that, and then part of the fact that. I didn't want to be sweaty for lifting the stones. I wanted to have a good surface that I could, you know, basically grab them and be confident in. So I was like, well, how is this going to happen? I don't really know anybody that sews. And I said, all right, I can get some leather. I found a place I could buy the big rolls of leather, like a whole hide at a time, that I could cut up. And then I could get the Velcro that I was going to try to, you know, do this with. And I needed a commercial sewing machine. So I was like, well, I'm going to teach myself how to sew. So I went down and bought a sewing machine and sat down at that thing and just experimented, watched some videos of like how you would do a pattern and like whatever and make the machine work. So you could step on the pedal on the bottom and then you could go backwards with this and whatever. So I just started practicing, and then it was just a trial and error thing. So I would show up to training, and the guys that were training with me, I'd bring in like a new a prototype of these sleeves. And I would say, all right, let's try this, because I had to try different leathers to see how, you know, strong they were, or how they would adhere to the stones or whatever. So I did this whole trial and error thing. But then through that, I started modifying my the gear that I wore. So I kind of had these different ideas for how I could make it a little bit better, whatever. And so that's what I started doing. So for, you know, probably 10 plus years, I modified like the belt that I was wearing, and I started to come up with these different ideas. And at that time, I didn't really have the money to invest in doing my own thing, but I had all the ideas. And so I, you know, had shared these ideas with different people. And I was like, you know what, why am I trying to help out like other people? Why don't I need to just take the leap and do this myself. Because I have the ideas, and I was kind of starting to get, I don't want to say taken advantage of, but kind of, right? Because I was sharing these ideas, and there was different people that were kind of running with them, and I was starting to frustrate me. So at that point, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. Like, I'm just gonna take the leap and say I'm gonna invest the money, I'm gonna make it happen, And so at that point, it was kind of taking all the modifications and stuff that I had done and turning it into Evolution Athletics, basically. And so that's where that kind of was born from. And it took like the belt, the support belt that we do. It's the best.
It's not like my standard Jay Cutler weight belt.
No, it's more of a supportive belt, but the sides you can tighten up in a different way.
Okay.
But it's something that strongmen have worn for a long time, but the ones that had been developed were not good.
I love his thing. He just says it's just the best.
Yeah.
I remember
Well,
me and him would chat about it, and he'd be like, see that guy wearing that one? That one? That one? That one? That one? Those are my belts, and they bought them.
Well, it says, so I know it's good, right? I know it's good, and I was very confident after prototyping it for so long. But wearing it, then you start to see other people wearing it, and especially when the top guys wear it, it's like, okay.
Most of the guys are strong.
Yeah,
most of the top guys, you'd see the logo on them.
Yeah, and it's not, one of these things where they obviously have an option, to wear something different if they want, but if they're going to put it on and be that confident with it, I was confident with it because like I said, I've modified my own for a decade.
And this was when someone was just throwing you a check to wear it. This is something that you made exactly that you knew it was going to be the best.
Yep. I went back and the thing is you can do, I guess the best way to say it is you can do things where they're okay, or you can do things where they're amazing, right? And there's, without going into that from a business side, it's just like, I will not accept anything that's not the best. So if it costs more, if it is harder to do, whatever, we're going to do it that way, right? And that's just my mentality because, number one, I want to wear it for myself, right? So if I want to wear it for myself, why would I not want the best possible? So
I think I remember when you made your initial, you did a big order. I remember you saying something. You're like, you put a lot of money up, but I think if I remember, you flipped it. Well, like a week or something.
And Jay will probably attest to this. One thing I'm willing to do is bet on myself.
The best investment you'll ever make, especially when you sit here with the confidence, like I don't put out anything that I don't use that isn't necessary and of course isn't the best, right?
Yep. Well, if people realized, and this is something I probably should talk about more, but if people realized the behind the scenes kind of nuts and bolts of how business works, it's like you can make choices that affect your bottom line, right? So it's like you again, with stuff like that, you potentially could do it cheaper, sure, right? But is it going to last the same? No. Is it going to be the same quality? No. Right? And I'm just not willing. I'm not willing to compromise that. So I would rather spend more, do it better from the start. And it might, in a lot of ways, you know what? It might hurt me on the back end because they're going to last way longer and they're going to be better, right? But that's just the way that I would approach it. And that's the way that I'll approach anything I do is it's good enough is just not good enough. It has to be perfect. It needs to be the best that it possibly can. And so, I'm really proud of that. It was a labor of love in a lot of ways, getting that done. And it's neat to see it being worn by so many people now.
I know, and people wear my belts, and I love seeing my shit out there.
Totally. It's just, it's neat. And again, it's like so cool to sit here and because I've seen all of it and like how you've got out there, and I've learned a lot. And so the amount of respect that I have for you is huge due to all of these different things. But I've been watching since kind of you were coming up, and really establishing yourself in different ways. And then the first Olympia that I went to, it's like you're up on stage and it's like, wow, I got to see this guy in the Colorado Athletic Club, and now you're standing on stage and it's one of these battles with you and Ronnie, and it's like, man, it was fun, man. It's been a fun kind of evolution, if you will, of different things.
So now when evolution started, did you have the new home gym yet?
So that
I was going to touch on that because you trained in your parents' garage for a long time.
You broke the floor there.
Yeah,
you broke the floor, but you've hit a certain level of success to where you could actually put your own custom gym in your yard, which very few people have.
Only see this shit. This is, we talk about the struggles, and I'm really glad you touched that because they only see the success, which they see all mine.
They see
right?
the now. Yeah. They see the spotlight.
But I want to hear. I want to hear about the new.
Talk about the gym that you have now, and then you have the upstairs where you have all that.
Totally.
We can touch on what's coming down the road too.
Yeah. So basically, evolution was kind of getting started at that point. So we had to, just based on Shaw Strength, mainly like our merchandise we have with Shaw Strength, we were expanding. So it kind of was a bedroom, and then it was a little bit bigger office, and then we needed more space. So we got our new place, and then we were able to build like a bigger outbuilding, garage, whatever you want to call it. It's more than an outbuilding, more because it's like fully insulated and heat and air conditioning, whatever. It's great for that. But going into it, I think at that point it was kind of Evolution Athletics was kind of starting with that. And I knew that I needed the room based on the orders that we would have to put in to make it work. So that's where that kind of started. Then the gym, I've always kind of had my own gym since I was in my parents' place, but it went from there to, like I said, that grocery store that was closed down where I got to use their storeroom. And then I ended up doing a commercial with Hefty bags back after, that was like after I'd won World's Strongest Man, like 2012, right? And so the money that I got from that commercial, I invested into storage condos back then, because I was like, well, I'm going to need this, and it'll be a great space, number one, for my gym. But then down the road, I'm always like trying to look forward and whatever. So I was like, I'm going to need a place for storage with something I'm going to do. So it'll be a great investment to buy these places to have my gym, number one. And then, down the road, whether I rent it or do whatever. But I took the money mainly from that commercial and was able to buy into those at that time. And that's where the gym was. And then it was at, we got a place that had a bigger garage. So it moved over there, and then it moved back to the storage condos while this place was being built. So it's moved 5 or 6 times, which moving a gym is not easy. There's a lot of weights and a lot of stuff to move around. But
now you have like a full-fledged like gym.
Yeah, it's great, man. And now we're at a point where we've outgrown that space.
And that wasn't even built that long ago.
No, it was not. We finished that. We finished that at the beginning of 2020. And I told my wife, I was like, look, my goal is, I know we just finished this and it's great, but my goal is that I want to outgrow that in a year or close to it.
Could you imagine?
Right.
It cost a lot of money. Could you imagine building something knowing I'm going to outgrow it in a year, and I just spent all this money?
Just a goal. It's like, I like to set the goals, man. And so that's been that. And then now we're starting Undefined Nutrition, which is our nutrition brand. And we're going to have that in-house as well. So that's where now we need the space to go.
So now you have your current spot, but you're already developing another spot.
Well, I had to move out. I had to move out some of the equipment from one side of the gym now, because we had to get a shipment in there. So it's kind of like, okay, I need more. I wanted more room, to be fair. I wanted more room for the gym anyway. Yeah. So now we're gonna have to move to a new place, which will be. It's a great opportunity. It's tough, man, because I like the house that we're at and whatever, but it's just kind of a natural growth thing. And I really am passionate about trying to keep everything in-house. At least I like to be able to touch things and interact. And I feel like it kind of goes with, like, if somebody wants me to sign something or do whatever, like, I really try to do that stuff and, interact with them that way. So that's just a goal, to have it. I don't know that we're ever going to always be able to keep it there. It depends on how much it grows, of course. But I'm excited, man. I get excited about a lot of this stuff, but it's kind of transitioning, if you will.
It's awesome,
like
man.
You're transitioning from, competing, and I'm still competing now, but let's be fair. I mean, Father Time's undefeated. It's not like I'm going to be able to compete forever, and I don't. It's cool because I don't have to compete now. I definitely don't have to, but I'm doing it for fun. I really am having fun with it, and I still like that competitive outlet. And I'll just transition, much like you've done, like just transition that competitiveness into business and different opportunities and things that I'm excited about. That's what I would love to do. So
I want to know the difficult things about being Brian Shaw. This is a tough question because I know the difficult things I had to endure. We kind of laughed about, I know there's something coming up, on your YouTube that you're kind of out here doing, but what do you think has been the biggest obstacle? Like being,
I would say probably.
I mean, listen, you're famous, you're driven. and you're bigger than the average person. So
You're bigger than the average large person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would, gosh, there's a lot of difficult things I don't think people realize, and I think you would realize more. So, if you're clothing wise, and I'm sure when you were on stage competing, man, it's like, I can only imagine
What
like
size is that shirt?
5X. Yeah.
See, I only wore 4.
4, but still, I
Yeah,
mean,
what a pipsqueak you were.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean it's one of those things where like if you're going to get any nicer clothes, you got to have custom clothes done because it just doesn't work. Obviously shoes, I'm like a size 18, sometimes a 17 depending on the shoe.
J-Mac,
like,
you hear that?
Yeah.
And listen, he's got cement 3s he just pulled out in the car too.
So I each trip that I go on, I'll bring a different pair of Jordans with me. And so I was coming out here and Jay walked out to meet me, and I was like, man, this is meant to be.
And I've never seen him on those shoes.
I've never worn these probably.
I've never seen him with them.
That's amazing. It's too similar. It's just meant to be. But I would say like stuff like that. Obviously, the eating is a challenge. Just normal life fitting into. There's a lot of vehicles I can't drive.
What's going through my head right now? There's an old video of you trying to get on a plane and you couldn't fit, and he's the same way. There's video you can't get on a plane.
Man, it's tough.
So when because I help Brian with his appearances, and every time I get on the phone with a promoter, the first thing I have to look at is where is it? Because sometimes it'll be in the middle of nowhere, and I'll have to look it up, and I'm like, there's no first class that goes there, and it's not a bougie thing. He doesn't fit.
You know what's so
we
crazy?
Can't get him there.
Like we've gone to these appearances. I don't know if you've experienced this, right? I was like booked every weekend going somewhere, and I'm like, hey, we'll pick you up from the airport.
Yep.
And I say, listen, I'm 300 pounds, and I'm bringing a bag and everything else. I mean, if they didn't show up with 5 buddies in the car, with no space for anything, they showed up with the smallest vehicle ever. And I'm like, you're kidding
Makes no
me,
sense.
right?
Yeah.
The funniest story that I remember with that.
Totally true.
Phil Heath and I went to France. Yeah. And you're going internationally, so you got a lot of bags.
Totally.
We're going there for this appearance, and the guy picks us up in a A7 Audi, the hatchback. And I'm like,
how are you going to get the bag?
How the fuck do we fit in this? And I remember sitting there, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, we can't fit in there. But they had another vehicle. They put half of our bags, so we had to drive like an hour.
Oh, my gosh.
And in France, there's no speed limit, so the guy's going like 130.
Wow.
And we're sitting in the back like this, with bags all over us, and I'm looking, I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here?
It's
like
not
we're
comfortable.
We're gonna die in this car because he's going through traffic.
I know, but you can't rent a full-size car, can you?
No.
He has to get an SUV.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. It's like one of the things that I wanted to get was like a sports car. Right? I was just as a kid, I just couldn't fit. Right, so it's like kind of a goal to.
Have you tried to get in anything that was like, hey, I'm sure you've been all over the world, so
yeah.
Like, what have you tried to sit in? Do people ever say, hey, I want you to sit in my car just to take a picture?
I've tried like different supercars, like a Lamborghini.
Do you remember when you went on that thing and they made you deadlift the car, the YouTube?
Oh yeah.
And remember when you were didn't you try to get in the car,
yes.
the Camaro?
I got in there, but it was a convertible, and my head's like above the freaking windshield. And
so what about amusement parks? Would you take the kids?
I can't.
You can't fit in like the roll. The thing comes down.
Nope.
I can't even fit in that even now. It's hard.
I don't know how some
I look at everyone else's, and mine's still up here, and theirs are like tucked into their lap.
No, that's definitely a no. Yeah, that's for sure a no. So there's a lot of stuff I just can't do. I'm hoping we can work around it, like with the kids, like you said, like as they're growing up. Some of that I think will be a different challenge in some ways. But yeah, I was really happy when the truck that I got. It's my sports car, right? But it's like just a Shelby
I hear
F-150.
about this from him. He talks about it all the time.
Yeah, I love that truck. But it's like something I can get in, and it's
and you can go
770
hear that, J-Mac?
horsepower. Yeah,
Shelby.
Yeah. Are you? There you go.
Your brother has. It's not a Shelby though, is it? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but even when back to when I talk to promoters, so sometimes promoters will call, and I just had this conversation with someone the other day, and they're like, well, we want them to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And you have to remember, and I want to tell them, I'd say, Brian's 400 pounds. He has to eat every couple hours. Yeah. He can't do this. And I said, and on top of that, if you eat this much a day, you got to sit on the toilet 5 times a day too. You have to budget.
You
we don't
actually
talk,
said,
we don't
actually
talk
said-
about that shit.
I say that, but that's real.
Yeah.
You have to budget this in. It's like if you eat 10,000 calories a day, you're going to take 10 shits a day too. So I'm like,
You know what's
you can't go for 16 hours.
I did a seminar one time, and I swear to God, the first question a kid asked,
Yeah.
it was packed seminar, and he says, "How many times a day do you take a dump?"
Awesome.
And I was
Great way
like,
to start.
"What
Yeah.
the fuck?" And I don't even know what to say because the parents are sitting there, and the kid's young, getting into this, and
Yeah.
they want to know these things,
Yeah.
But if you think about it though, it's real. You got to pay attention to this.
No, you have to. The thing is, you got to plan all that out too.
Yeah.
It's just part of the I guess job, if you want to call it that. It's like it's you can't just go from this to this to this because you have to have the downtime to eat. And a lot of people, I think, don't think about that, right? And like you said, sometimes you were sitting there for 45 minutes to an hour eating a meal. It's not like you can just sit down and consume that amount of food.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially if you're struggling a little bit to get it down, there's, I don't know, it at times when I was up, it's kind of funny, but I would sometimes get up from the table and like literally have to get focused to finish my food.
Yeah.
It's like I got to get up and like pace back and forth and like almost look at the food like it's a weight or something. Like I got to get that down. That's holding me back from, getting to where I want to go. If I don't sit down and eat this, I got to do it. But people don't realize like, okay, sometimes that takes extra time or that, it's just part of, and I think, maybe I'm missing some stuff, but it's like maybe I've dealt with it for so long that it's just
You're
like
used to it.
normal.
But the average Joe doesn't see these unless you've been around you and you see it. And the same.
Well, I can't go shopping, right? Like people could go to a store and try on some clothes or something.
Even sneakers, like you wear.
I can't do that either.
There's very few places that have.
Who carries that?
You have to.
I remember as a kid, I found out about like eSpay, where you could
from
order.
where I'm from in Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin, right? Yeah. So it's like I found out about that because you'd go to stores, and back then it wasn't like you could go online and just shop. It was like you'd go to a store and have to ask them, "Hey, do you have a big size of this shoe, whatever?" And it was once I got past the size 15, it was like impossible. Like you just go and you'd find like one or two, but it was definitely not the shoe.
What is Shaq's foot?
I think he's like a 20.
Oh, he is? Wow.
22, yeah.
See, for me, so Eastbay's from a small town in northern Wisconsin, and we used to always go to their outlet center because you could get shoes for $10, $15.
I would have been.
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that. We would get it in the mail and be like, "Oh, cool." I didn't realize that people relied on them all over the country.
I did for sure. I did
because you could go on there and you could say, "Hey, I want these shoes," and you could call them, or you could mail a check in and you put your size and they would have it.
Yeah.
So do you have a shoe plug or?
Like,
do you have a shoe plug, like someone that gets your shoes for you?
I don't.
We got to find him one.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I love them, man. I like you said, probably like. What's your favorite Jordan?
A Jordan 1 is the high top Jordan ones.
Is your number one?
Yeah, that's what I wear mostly.
I figured you'd say the 11. 11
yeah, the
so
11s
popular.
are good too. That's his. It's his.
11.
You like the Concord.
So you know what's funny?
See, I would say either maybe the 4s.
Yeah,
the 4s for me are probably.
See, I knew he was a huge Jordan sneaker fan when I saw Jordans on his sons. They make sure they got better sneakers than I do.
How much you spend on those?
Oh my God! So I wanted to get. What release was that? I've done it a couple times. I think it might have been the 11s. It was 11s. I think.
I remember seeing the pictures of them.
Yeah, and I probably spent just on their little. And I mean, you're talking like a.
They're this big.
Oh, I was like It was like $120 or something for those. And then the thing is, they sell out so quick.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get a pair for my wife, for me, and then for our boys. But you end up spending like
$1,000.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And then of course they grow out of them so quick that it's like, okay, we got one picture that was cool. You had to, But
so one other thing I wanted to actually touch on too. One of the things that has helped made you more of a household name now is the strongest men in history.
Yeah,
which is everywhere we went and did an appearance not long ago in Pennsylvania. It was at an Oktoberfest. This isn't a strongman. This isn't a bodybuilding. This is a bunch of people getting drunk, but they wanted him there because of that show. So talk about how that developed and your relationship with the different guys, because we know, Nick lives here in Vegas, and the different guys live in different parts of the world. So how did that come about, and how have you seen the difference in your life since that?
So when that first started, I've done actually a couple different pilots for TV shows where they come out and film the pilot and then they pitch it to the network. Mm-hmm. And, it's different concepts and different things. And so initially I was like, oh, it's just another one of those, because I'd done a couple and they haven't worked out. And so I was like, okay, I'm a little bit more standoffish in a way. But they set up a video call and kind of asked me some questions. And then they started talking about what the show might be about. And I was like, okay, this is a concept I think that could work, because you're talking about strength and history, replicating some of these feats of strength, and us traveling there and almost having like a fact-checking part of it, where
because some of these feats of strength, they're like, some of them are just legendary, or you don't even know if it really happened.
It's almost like some of Folklore. The feats of strength and history are not well documented, but they're talked about. Folklore. So it's like it's almost like a fishing story, where it's like, hey, the fish was this big, and then it's this big, and then it's this big. So maybe it started with, it was 200 pounds, and then it was 500 pounds, and then it was 700 pounds. With whatever the guy was lifting. So we would go there, and I've always been fascinated by strength history anyway. Yeah. So I was like, man, this is like something that I could get into. And at that point when they're talking to me, I didn't realize who else they were talking to. So it's kind of like, hey, here's the concept of the show. We're going to, do our little Zoom meeting, kind of figure out how interested you are and whatever. And so they ended up flying, and I think it was something, we were probably texting or something, messaging, and kind of we were figuring out like who was involved and whatever. And then we ended up going up to Canada to do the pilot. So we filmed the pilot in the same way, but they did it where we just went to that was Angus McCaskill. So he's like a giant up there, and they have a whole museum dedicated to him in this town up there, and it was cool. And we had a good time with it. And so they pitched this show to them, and the head of the network loved it, because, we involved some eating, we involved the feats of strength, and then we had kind of like a side story where it's like, hey, why are we here? What are we doing? We're having fun. And then each guy was kind of the lead, if you will, in one of the shows. And so it just worked really well. And the guys that the director and producer, that main guy had done Duck Dynasty. So it was like he had a good track record of doing it. So they bought off, and it was, something where we would go film, but we were scheduled each day for 13 hours of filming.
Holy shit.
And then you'd film, well, I feel like it was about 5 days of 13 hours to film one show that got cut down to like 45 minutes. So I never got to see the cuts before they went on TV, but we filmed so much good stuff. And I would get done, and my wife would say, well, that was pretty good. And I would be like, well, why didn't they put this in and that in? And we did this. It was amazing. And
that was one of the other things I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I know you've shared some of them. Tell us a couple of your favorite things that didn't make it, that were, whether they were inappropriate or whether they were just tell us the things.
Yeah, they there was a lot. There was a lot that
because you had a group it's a group of characters.
So one of the funniest things, honestly, even the guys that were filming were literally on the floor laughing, was me and Robert Oberst, and we were in Scotland, and we were doing a bagpipe lesson, right? So there's a certain amount of, I'll try to describe, but it's like a certain amount of air pressure that you have and maintain for a bagpipe to do its thing. But you can't blow too hard, because it won't work, right? And so we're taking this lesson, and the woman teaching us, I hope she wasn't mad after the fact, but we're in there, and I start kind of like with Oberst, I'm kind of like almost getting in one of these modes where let's make this a contest, right? So I would go back and forth, and then I would like high five the woman teaching us, but she was trying to be super serious. Yeah. And we're just like taking it as like, I almost was taking it like, if I can blow harder and make this thing make this noise where it's not working, that I'm winning, right? So it was like going back and forth, and Oberst then got into it, and he was like egging it on, back and forth. And I'm not describing it nearly as good as it would have been on film, But it was like we were going back and forth, and this woman, you know, because in all fairness, that's something that you have to, it's just very much a skill. Like you have to learn how to play a bagpipe. And when you hear them and somebody does it well, it's like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. But we're never going to learn in those. I quickly realized that we were not going to get it down in a couple minutes, but we're doing this lesson. You know, it was kind of like they're trying to involve the culture. It was really cool, but we had a great time and just rolling, laughing, you know, whatever it was. But there was, you know, some different stuff where normally the more crude stuff involved Eddie.
Of course.
There was
the time he was naked in your room in one of them? In the bathroom?
No, that was Oberst and him.
Oh.
We played this off like they had got booked in the same hotel room. So they filmed a scene where it was like, I think it might have been Oberst in the shower and Eddie was on the toilet, you know, or something. It was, but
I watched it and I just remember one time one of the guys lost and he had to drink out of someone's shoe.
Oberst. That was gross. That was gross.
They had made a bet the loser had to drink water or something out of the other guy's shoe.
Yeah, I saw it.
Honestly, I'm glad I wasn't involved.
Was there any certain one that you did where like you were like, holy shit, I did this. This is like, I'm in history now.
I think probably there was a few of those moments, but I think the Dinny Stones in Scotland, just because I had heard about that so much, and it's such a famous feat of strength, like carrying those. Like picking them up, like lifting them off the ground is a huge thing, and they keep a book there, which they actually, if you do it, they put your name down in the book and when you did it and whatever. So they've got a history of these stones.
There's only so many people you even lifted them. Right?
Yeah, and I don't know how many people have lifted them, but what they did for us was they put them up on the bridge, and they only do this so often, where you actually carry them on the bridge, where Donald Dinny supposedly carried them all the way across this bridge. So that was what they had us do, but I didn't even know I was going to be doing it until I got there. So it was like we're doing all these other things, and then they had us do this. And at the time, I was able to break the world record in carrying them across there. It was tough, really tough. Like because one of them is like 418 pounds. I should know exactly, but it's somewhere in that range. The other one's like 100 pounds lighter, so it's very off balanced on the side. But I would say that there was a few lifts that we did on that were really memorable, that I enjoyed, but I also enjoyed like the history. Got to go to Paul Anderson's childhood home.
Yeah.
And I found in the basement, one of the things I was super pumped about is he had like some of the old deep dish York plates in his basement. And this is like where he worked out. So it was like under his house, and he dug it out. And then in order to lift, he had poured concrete into a safe, and he would straddle it in a hole. And he'd put a belt on, like a belt squat almost, and like lift it out of the hole, because there was no weights and stuff, you know. So he had fabricated his own bars, and they were in there. I was like, some of the stuff they didn't show, I was blown away by. Like he had done like almost like a primitive trap bar, and I don't remember exactly how it was shaped, but it's something for him that he had somebody weld up for him to lift. But those old plates, man, those were like. It was like the plates that he lifted on, and they were literally down in this like cellar under his house and just stacked up. And I was like, that is crazy.
Museum or something.
Yeah. He had a set of like the really old York round head dumbbells. Mm-hmm. And I had gone in, and I was so disappointed because they were missing one of the hundreds. So they had the whole set of these dumbbells up to the hundreds, and they only had 100. And I was like, what happened to the 100? And they were kind of like, oh, we don't know. Maybe somebody took off with it, whatever. And I was so disappointed by that, right? Because it was like, that's like.
Did you like try to buy it from them or anything for your?
I didn't. I really wanted to ask him about getting a set of the plates. Like that would have been cool. Just strength history, you know. Yeah. But I was like, you know what? They have a boys' home. He started a boys' home for like troubled boys, basically, like a youth home. And so I thought about asking him if I could donate some money to that, if I could just like get a pair of those plates. I thought that would have been cool, but it was his family, and I didn't want to throw that out there without, you know, I didn't want it to be in bad taste.
I'll reach out for you.
Yeah. But I found out. So the cool part is his family didn't even know this. We went to his like memorabilia room, and he had a table of different things. And on the table, one of the things that he used to do to try to raise money was he'd do, you know, kind of like public events where he would speak and then also do like a feat of strength or something. And so he would do a pinky lift, right? So it ended up, and they were telling us like he had messed his pinky up so bad that he couldn't bend it anymore, like as he got older, because he had done this. But in the room there were these round weights, right? And they had a little thing kind of fixed to the top so he could do this pinky lift. And I picked it up, and that's what it was. It was a dumbbell. So Paul Anderson had cut the dumbbell up to do this demonstration so that he could talk in front of kids and people. But they didn't realize that. But I picked it up, and sure enough, it was that dumbbell he had cut up to do that. So he'd put one on each pinky and then kind of stand out.
So that was the missing?
That was the missing one.
Wow.
But they didn't realize he had done that. So it was kind of cool. Like, I feel like I was able to help them discover like where that dumbbell went, you know? But that was cool. It was a neat show. And what it did is that show reached a lot of people that would not have normally tuned in to watch a strongman contest or whatever. And I thought it was also cool to honor the guys that we were able to do shows on, because some of these guys there was no documentation really, other than
recognition.
Maybe, so it's like you're bringing attention to them for some of these things that they did that were really, really cool. And there's stories that people tell about him, but I feel like that show was.
I actually watched all the episodes because it was. I'm a history nerd.
Yeah,
and I watched it more, the history of it, and you guys talked about every last person in detail, what they did. Some of it seemed realistic, and some you're going, I don't know if they really did that. It's folklore.
Yep.
But you guys actually try to do it, and some of the feats that you guys couldn't do, it's like, if these guys can't do it, there's no way this guy did this 200 years ago.
And that's the interesting part. That's the interesting part, is like figuring out, was it real? Was it not real? How hard was it? What's the setting? And then, for some of these guys, how did they potentially train to do this? Or was it kind of like some of the guys were just hard workers and they had to do it for work? So they would, they were hands-on manual labor people that they just did that. Like, Peter Francisco was one of the big episodes that I did, but he was part of like the, like George Washington, like called him the guy that like helped change the war and like all this stuff, which was cool. But he worked in like a blacksmith shop. This is like a helper.
Wasn't he a slave?
He was.
And then he got his freedom.
He was. But he was big. Like he was like 6'8" and whatever. Like what did they call him? The American Giant, I want to say, something like that. But he was just a big guy, but like just functional strength. And he, the big feat of strength that he did was he carried a cannon off of this battlefield. And so that was a really fun one. That episode where, and it was crazy, like to think like in the moment, because of course you got your adrenaline going and all that. But this cannon, I was out of all the guys they tried, I was the only one that could pick it up and carry it like that. But it was it the same size cannon? So we brought in this guy that had these cannons, and he had this whole collection and whatever to replicate that feat of strength. But it was cool, man. Like the coolest thing was you got to connect with different people that would have never probably been in that, area where they're going to watch a strongman contest. But it's like, hey, this is history mixed with strength, and you get to introduce strongman, if you will, to like a bigger audience. So that was really cool. I was super disappointed it only did one season. I
know. I look forward to it, and I always thought to myself, because we would talk about it, and I'm like, damn, they left this out and this out and this out and this out. Like, you could have probably done a whole nother season on shit they didn't even.
Oh well, it was all planned. It was all planned. Season number 2 was all planned and ready to rock, and they.
Well, you got to find a way. You can be the executive producer. Let's bring out season 2.
Yeah, I think it would definitely work.
Oh, for sure.
But it's just like dedicating the time and resources and everything. To do it, but they were planning it out. I have my guesses on why it didn't go, but who knows? It was sad because the ratings that we got were really good, especially for a first season show. It was really good. So, but the connection, I think, with people, and like you said, it's like going to some of these different events and becoming more well known with other people. But it wasn't. People. Yeah, but it's one of those things where I think doing that, you connect with. Again, a broader audience, and that's great. I mean, if you can bring it to different people, and then, it's just that big circle where it's like, okay, well, they see that, and maybe they get motivated in a different way, and then it's a positive thing for them potentially.
I just remember we were flying out to Pennsylvania to go do this appearance, and everyone's like, "Is there a bodybuilding show there? Is there a strongman show?" I'm like, Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Like a bunch of
There were a
Germans
lot of-
drinking beer.
There were a lot of people that walked up there and they're like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here in this small town in Pennsylvania for this?"
Right. We get in there because it was like an hour. It was like an hour and some odd drive from Pittsburgh, and we get in there and this guy walks up and he shakes hands like, "I'm the mayor." It's like, what?
Yeah.
Okay, mayor.
It was cool, but all the people were great, man.
yeah.
They're just like such, again, it's like that small town vibe people. It was cool, man. It's cool meeting people like that because it's like, and you know this too. It's like you just different people from around the world. It's you get a sense of like different cultures and different backgrounds and it's but everybody can come together universally and be positive for a lot of reasons in these type of settings. So it's really good. Really good.
Speaking of positivity, so. I'm going to touch a little bit upon the Eddie Hall Havthor. They're going to do a boxing match.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. So
you got to have an opinion.
we have to know what you think of this and
what you think of it and who do you think could win and why?
I mean, this thing's gained a lot of notoriety. I mean, it's gone into every.
Joe Rogan was talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing is. I'll say this. When it first got announced, I think a lot of people were like, okay, cool. Like, what's going to happen, whatever. And now it's quite literally been, like a year and a half or more, where it's like been back and forth. And I think a lot of people are just like, okay, let's just do it, right? And I think even for Eddie, like I talked to Eddie a lot more about it, and he hasn't put out a lot of stuff, whereas Havthor's done some like exhibition type of things, from a competitive standpoint, like I know Eddie mentally, and when he locks in on something, he locks in on it hard. Yeah. And he'll do like almost anything that it takes to, whether it's, recovery this at his house or whatever. Like, and he picked up on a lot of that from me. He's told me, because I had like I had a cold tub and a hot tub, and I had different recovery things that nobody else had. And I was willing to invest a lot of money into those type of things. And Eddie was very much the same. Like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get better. And so he showed some of it like publicly on that side. But as far as like the training, he hasn't put out a lot of training. And, from the conversations that I've had with him, he's very confident. He's very, very confident. And Eddie actually did boxing as kind of like conditioning work and has dabbled in it for quite some time before all of this stuff started, which, did that help lay a foundation? I don't know. Whereas Havthor did not do any of that, and he's kind of coming into it now, but I think he's taken it seriously as well. Yeah. He's just happens to have put more stuff out there. So I think that some people have seen that and they're like kind of bashing Eddie and saying, well, why aren't you doing exhibition fights and this type of thing? And I think he just doesn't want to show his cards, because even if you do an exhibition fight, if you have a good coach or trainer, whatever, they can break that down and say, hey, what's your tendencies? How are you going to move? How are you going to react to this? And so it gives a lot of information out to your opponent. And it's kind of the same thing. Like when I'm training for something, a lot of times I won't put out some of my best stuff, right? Because I want to hold that for me. Yeah. And then strategically, from a mental standpoint, I might put it out when I want to put it out, right? But I may have done that a couple months before. So I just don't want to give my cards away. And I think Eddie's might be doing that a little bit. Speaking from that, I think it's kind of, some of the stuff they've been putting out recently, going back and forth about this and that.
$1 million, like, $200,000. Yeah.
I don't know about all that stuff, man. I would like to see it happen from a, that standpoint.
Happen. I think I know what it is, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say on camera.
Yeah, I think, and I probably know the same, but it's kind of like one of these things where I think the true strongman fans, some of them are on board with it, and I think some of them are not.
So it's kind of a shit show to some people.
Yeah. Whereas, like, for me, my whole thing is like I got into strongman where I wanted to help promote and grow the sport and make it bigger and leave it better when I'm gone than it started. And I think I've been on that track, and I'm still working towards that, but I'm very loyal to that. Whereas like some people, whatever. Everybody can have their own opinion, certainly. But it's like, I feel like they feel like these two guys are like, came in, they both won World's Strongest Man title. And then it was kind of like, okay, now we're going to turn into this and go in this direction. Okay. So I think some strongman fans are on board with it. I think some are not. Yeah. And, I think it's going to be that way probably going into the fight. It's like some people are going to be excited about it and some people are going to be like, okay, I'm tired of this circus. Like, I just want to be done with it. Yeah. But I would say, and I said this publicly too, like from talking with Eddie, where he's at mentally and what the way that he's talked to me, I feel like he feels like he has the upper hand. And, the stuff that he's been doing, he will lock in on something and go. Mm-hmm. So, and Eddie, out of my personal interactions with these two guys, Eddie grew up in a rough area, right? And he has been in fights. And you can see, like, when you get into a confrontational moment with somebody, if they have kind of that, like, crazy switch where it's like, all right, I can see the look in your eye and we're in a heated moment. You're ready to flip that switch and go. And Eddie has that. And my confrontations and things that I've had with Havthor, I don't think he has it the same way, right? So that's
you can tell he can get a little crazy if he needs to.
Big time. He will go. And now everybody reacts to being punched differently.
Of course.
So once you get in there, I don't know.
Like Tyson say, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
That's true. And that's the thing is you could have the best game plan in the world, but I know that Eddie's has been hit and has hit before, and not that Havthor has not with his training, but like. That's my personal interaction, right? It's just with these two guys. That's all I can really say is,
you're trying to say you would rather not face Eddie if you had to.
From a competitive standpoint, I like that fire, man. I like looking at him, and we've got into little things, but you can tell that like if it escalated, that Eddie would go to that next level.
Yeah.
I think from the crazy standpoint, I think Eddie, I would give him the upper hand is what I would say.
What do you think?
I think seeing what I'm seeing, I think he seems a little more aggressive in my opinion, just more edge to him. But that doesn't mean anything, it's just, I always wondered what some of the other guys thought. I mean, it's just like in our business, like people have opinions about different things, but I agree with you. It's like, you kind of build your legacy around it. And I just, I love the path that you took, and, we really appreciate you coming on today being our first guest, and it's been amazing to learn. I've learned a lot of things that I did not know, and a lot of your background that maybe I didn't realize that makes you the champion you are, and we're just really excited we were able to have you on.
I appreciate it, man, and it's fun. It's fun to sit down and talk shop, if you will, especially with somebody like you, because it's having that motivation and for me, like seeing you up there, because really, you were kind of getting to that level when I was really starting to get interested in it and starting to pursue it in a lot of ways. And so it's fun for me too, in that same regard, to learn like your path and your childhood and how that kind of evolved. And like I like a lot of those stories too, where it wasn't easy, it was hard, and you were able to kind of get through all of that, overcome every single challenge that came your way, and then get to the level that you're at now. I mean, it's awesome. And I have an appreciation for that in a lot of different ways, because I've, been able to kind of walk that same path in the same way, but a different way.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
It's very similar. Yeah.
Which is awesome. And I'm excited to be out here. I'm thankful you had me on, and it's been awesome, man.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah. No, and for me, it's good. I've known Jay half my life, and, I met Brian. I've seen him throughout the years, but we didn't really interact until the American Fitness Expo. And we were sitting downstairs. It was the one
you
time.
gave me a ride, right?
Yeah. It was the same year we were waiting for Kai Green.
Did you fit in the vehicle, or?
We had a Suburban.
Oh, okay.
It was the year where I had to rent that Suburban.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
And then we were waiting. You're like, I'm not waiting for fucking Kai Green.
Get
us over there.
Yeah, that's the one when we did it in the wood.
That was the
Houston.
second year.
Yeah, in Houston, yeah.
So I got everyone over, and I came back, and I go downstairs, and Brian's just sitting there. And he's just sitting downstairs. I'm like, yo, like, he's like, well, I'm waiting for, because he had like some shuttle.
It was a shuttle.
He's like, I'm waiting for the shuttle. I was like, dude, I'll give you a ride. He's like,
yeah,
for real?
Yeah.
So we got over there,
Didn't I get in and dump your drink or something?
So me, him, and David Bay's in the back seat, and we drive over, and I go to get something, and I have my diet soda there, and he fucking dumps it, like on accident.
It was total accident.
It was an accident, and it filled the whole center thing, and I'm like,
was bad.
You dumped my soda. So I picked the whole thing up, like, here, Brian, you want to drink my soda? And that was our first interaction.
That's funny.
And we just we stayed in contact since.
That's awesome, man. Well,
thanks for coming on, and it was
100%, guys.
We haven't had anyone on, and I told Jay, I said, our first guest needs to be big. So it's big physically, figuratively, and the fact that you two have, and I've told you this about Jay and Jay this about you, it's like you guys are so similar. And the first time, if you guys remember, I was going to have you guys together was at the Arnold 2 years ago.
That's right. Yep.
And you and him were going to do the
Seminar.
4-time Mr. Olympia versus 4 times World's Strongest Man. And Corona happened.
Yeah.
And it shut it down.
God, I was looking forward to that too. Yeah.
We'll make it happen again. It's going to happen again, but it's going to happen on our terms.
Totally.
So thanks again for coming on, man.
Appreciate both of you guys. Thank you.